Department of Justice and FBI released a very strange document a couple weeks ago. And it said there actually is two things in it that I agree with. It said that there are over 300 gigabytes of child abuse material taken from Epstein. I agree with that. And that there are over, quote unquote, 1,000 victims. And I agree with that. But let's walk back and see how all this came to the fore. On February 26th of this year, our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, said that she was going to release the Epstein files. I think Epstein files, Epstein lists are used interchangeably. I never really believed in an Epstein list. It's not like Jeffrey Epstein ran a travel agency and he kept a list of his patrons on the refrigerator with a magnet. Actually, the Black Book has a lot of the perpetrators. I mean, that is the grail. I mean, a lot of the people in the Black Book aren't perpetrators, but a lot of the people are. But anyway, Bondi said on the 26th that she was releasing the Epstein files. And then there were no new revelations. And I got a kick on it. I released more incriminating information on Jeffrey Epstein et al. In 2015 with Gawker between the Black Book and the flight logs than the Department of Justice did in 2025. So Bondi came out and released these documents. And actually, she released the Black Book that I put up, but we redacted the names of the phone numbers of adults. And then with the victims, as I've said before, we redacted their last names and also their numbers. And with Bondi and the Department of Justice, they redacted everything. So there were no names in the Black Book. Everything was redacted. But then when the documents turned out to be a nothing sandwich, Bondi came on and said on national television, said that she'd been bamboozled by the FBI New York field office. So that gives us an indication of one of two things. She didn't look at the files and she was inept, or she was lying on national television. And as you know, Sean, we've gotten to know each other over the years. I'm a charitable person. I'll just describe ineptitude to her. But then she further tarnished her credibility by saying that there was a truckload of evidence and only matters related to national security will be redacted. So now she has to tell us why a bunch of child molesters have anything to do with national security. And then her crescendo of mendacity was saying that the FBI was in the midst of looking at all the Epstein material. Epstein's safe was sawed open in 2019, the day after he was arrested. The feds couldn't get to that safe fast enough. And they took out many, many disks and hard drives. And according to the New York Times, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of images of child abuse material. So we're supposed to believe Pam Bondi when she says that the feds are are looking through all the evidence. The feds were looking at the evidence the day that they opened that safe up. There were double shifts. I mean, I can't imagine them not immediately starting to look at what is in Jeffrey Epstein's safe, because I think a lot of very interesting stuff was in Jeffrey Epstein's safe. So the Trump administration has kept lying and lying, and they put the white elephant in the living room, and then they came out with that silly document that said Epstein hadn't pandered to anybody, that he molested all these girls by himself, and that there wasn't any blackmail involved. So they thought that they could kill the white elephant, which was in the living room, and they killed the white elephant. But, the white elephant is still in the living room, and also it's starting to really, really stink. With Ghislaine Maxwell, yes, there was that deal that was made that gave her blanket immunity in Florida, and somehow the feds did contravene that. Their argument was that the Southern District of New York didn't have to adhere to a deal that was made in the Southern District of Florida. That was the argument that was made. And now with Ghislaine Maxwell, she was indicted on 2 counts of conspiracies, but no one else was indicted. I mean, so the federal judicial system is having some real problems with Jeffrey Epstein. And Maxwell is obviously going to play that card that the feds declared that Jeffrey Epstein hadn't worked with anyone or pandered to anybody. And if she gets out, that will be an unbelievable, egregious miscarriage of justice.
Yeah, I always said in the beginning that she was going to get some kind of play in the legal system, but it would come when there's not as much media interest in the story. She would get out quietly. And she's got a lot, I reckon, on the Clintons, etc., and perhaps even Trump, because we've seen Trump now suing Rupert Murdoch over this alleged letter he sent to Jeffrey for his 50th birthday that was of a sexual nature with a bawdy doodle. And that's just really blown up in the news in the past couple of days. Do you think that is a warning shot fired by Maxwell, as many independent researchers are presently claiming that she's basically saying to Trump, I've got much more than this. Unless I fall through the cracks, I've got leverage on you, and I can, open the gates of Pandora's box.
The thing with Maxwell is she's always had leverage. She knows exactly who those perpetrators are. Exactly. In the Franklin scandal, Epstein is kind of, in many ways, a carbon copy of the Franklin scandal, about the child trafficking network that I wrote about. And there were 2 primary pimps. There was Lawrence King and there was Craig Spence. And Lawrence King kept his mouth shut and was given 10 years, not for anything to do with molesting children, which he molested hundreds of children, but for his financial crimes. He had plundered a credit union called the Franklin Credit Union, ergo the Franklin scandal. But Craig Spence was actually, he had a lot of media. Well, they both had a lot of media on them. But Craig Spence was the blackmail artist. He was the guy that had the mansion in Washington, D.C. that was wired for audiovisual blackmail. And I reported on that. I've got a lot of corroboration on it. And it shows up in 2 of the books that I've written. And Craig Spence was used to his creature comforts. There's no way that he could have, I think, been able to take prison. So I think that this dark, malignant corner of intelligence that gives us King and Spence and Maxwell and Epstein told him that either he could kill himself or they would kill him. So he checked into the Ritz-Carlton in Boston, and in a tuxedo, he took an overdose of nortriptyline, and he wrote some stuff that was kind of incriminating, but that was how Craig Spence went. With Epstein, there was just too much media on him. He could no longer be a blackmail artist. And the same thing with Diddy, because all these civil suits were being filed against Epstein and all these civil suits were being filed against Diddy. And the thing is, I believe that Epstein was involved in blackmail, and I also believe that Diddy was involved in blackmail. But now that these federal lawsuits started coming out and it started blowing up in the media, that completely negates their ability to be blackmailers. And I think that Epstein probably couldn't have handled prison. And that's why he died a very mysterious death that the feds gave us some videotape of. It's gotten to kind of silly. I think Maxwell was given a deal, and this is just my extrapolation. Ghislaine, you've done some good work for us. You've helped us compromise a lot of people, but you're going to have to do some time. There's just too much heat on you. But, we'll keep it to a minimum. And they put her in dormitory living really quickly. And dormitory living is generally for inmates that have been exemplary inmates that are nearing the end of their sentence. So Ghislaine Maxwell had it cush right out of the gate as far as federal prison. And her lawyers have been appealing her conviction ever since. And her family has a website saying that she's innocent. She's really, Ghislaine Maxwell is a malignant witch, and she should spend the rest of her life in prison. She was only indicted on one count of child trafficking when she trafficked children for probably 25 years. And that's a heavy sentence in the federal system. That's 15 to life. So she should have spent the rest of her life in prison. But so it'll be very fascinating to see how Ghislaine Maxwell's case is adjudicated from here on.
Yeah, it absolutely will, because Jean-Luc Brunel ended up unalived, just like Jeffrey. But Maxwell goes on doing a yoga at Club Fed and having all this leverage, which is it's fascinating to see how it's going to play out. So with Craig Spence, one of the headlines was Midnight Tours of the White House. Could you expand on that?
Craig Spence was doing his blackmail thing. He was a CIA asset, like Epstein was a CIA asset. And he was giving midnight tours of the White House with gay escorts, and I think probably underage victims in tow. And the Washington Times launched a big story about it. And the Washington Times did some amazing reporting on Craig Spence. And I think that that's ultimately why Craig Spence was given the choice of either we kill you or you kill yourself, because there was just too much attention on him. But what I found fascinating is the Washington Times was pumping out these really good articles on Craig Spence. They were even nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. And the New York Times, the Washington Post and the New York Times and the LA Times ganged up on the Washington Times and basically said that they were publishing fictions. And we've seen that before, like with the Gary Webb case, where the big three will gang up on a smaller newspaper that's launched a very startling story about something that's connected to the CIA.
So another name then that has come up over and over again. I mean, we looked at the flight logs 5 or 6 years ago, and he was on the flights with all of these East European sounding girls like Titania, etc., without his security detail. And that's Bill Clinton. And Trump is saying now that this hoax was made up under the Clinton, Obama, Russiagate era by the Democrats. Why would the Clintons want to implicate themselves by furthering this story? Because it seems to me that Bill Clinton's more deeply involved than Trump. Would you say that is the case, or am I wrong?
It's difficult to know who is more deeply involved, Bill Clinton or Trump. Bill Clinton, Epstein was getting girls, that weren't children, that were older than 18 years old. He was delivering them to Clinton when Clinton was in the White House. And as I said earlier, Epstein had 24 contact numbers for Clinton. But then Trump has this long legacy too with Clinton or with Spence or Epstein. So it's difficult to know who is in mesh. But Bill Clinton has been compromised for a very long time. And when he was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship to the UK to study at Oxford, it's been reported that he was working for the CIA at that point, reporting on anti-war demonstrators. So I think Bill Clinton has been dirty for a very long time. And Donald Trump does not have the most pristine background either with his dealings with the mafia, the Italian mafia. And it's been alleged also the Russian mafia. And he and Epstein were friends for a very, very long time, as the letter seems to indicate.